The blizzard's icy fingers clawed at Eliza Nolan's bare shoulders as she stumbled through knee-deep snow, her nightgown offering no protection against the vicious winter of 1874. Each ragged breath burned in her lungs as she fled blindly through the Colorado wilderness, pine trees looming like dark sentinels in the moonlight. Behind her lay the burning remnants of everything she had known. Ahead, only the vast unknown of a merciless frontier night. Eliza's feet had gone numb, her toes bleeding from countless cuts as she pushed forward. The memory of Bartholomew Green's twisted face as he'd set fire to her family's homestead drove her onward despite the agony. She could still hear his drunken threats echoing through the timber walls as she'd escaped through the back window. Her father had stayed behind to hold him off, and the gunshot that followed would haunt her forever. She stumbled, falling face first into the snow. The cold shocked her system, but the tears freezing on her cheeks burned hotter than any flame. Rising to her knees, Eliza stared into the swirling darkness ahead. Death waited in the bitter cold, but submission to Green meant something worse. "Stand up," she whispered to herself through chattering teeth, forcing her legs to obey. "Stand up." The sound of hoofbeats broke through the howling wind. Terror surged through her veins, giving her one last burst of desperate energy. But her frozen limbs betrayed her, and she collapsed again, the snow welcoming her like a cold grave. The horse drew closer, its rider dismounting with a crunch of boots on snow. Eliza curled into herself, waiting for the final blow. Instead, warm hands gently lifted her, and something heavy and warm enveloped her trembling form, a wool blanket smelling of leather and pine. "You're safe now," a deep voice whispered as strong arms cradled her against a broad chest. Eliza's eyes fluttered open, meeting concerned blue ones beneath the brim of a weathered hat. Not Green's hateful glare, but a stranger's compassionate gaze. "Please," she managed through blue lips. "He's coming." "Nobody's getting to you tonight," the man assured her, his voice as steady as the mountains surrounding them. "I'm Finn Zachary. I've got a cabin not far from here." He lifted her onto his horse, mounting behind her and wrapping protective arms around her waist. As they rode through the snowstorm, Eliza felt consciousness slipping away, her body surrendering to exhaustion and cold. "Stay with me," Finn urged, his breath warm against her ear. "Just a little longer." Eliza fought to keep her eyes open, clinging to his solid presence as the blizzard raged around them. When a small log cabin emerged from the whiteout, it seemed like a mirage. Inside, Finn moved with practiced efficiency, laying her before a fireplace and quickly building a roaring fire. The heat was almost painful against her frozen skin. "Miss," his voice sounded distant, "I need to get you warm. Your nightgown is soaked through." Eliza nodded weakly, beyond modesty or protest. Finn turned his back as she managed to shed the sodden garment, then wrapped her in several thick blankets. "Drink this," he said, holding a tin cup of something steaming to her lips. The whiskey-laced coffee burned a trail down her throat, igniting warmth from within. As feeling returned painfully to her extremities, Eliza studied her rescuer as he tended to his horse through the cabin window. Tall and broad-shouldered beneath a heavy sheepskin coat, he moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to fending for himself. When he returned, stamping snow from his boots, she noticed the revolver holstered at his hip. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice raspy. "You saved my life," Finn nodded, hanging his coat and hat near the door. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Eliza said firmly. "They wouldn't have." Finn's gaze softened as he knelt beside her. "Your feet need tending." "May I?" At her nod, he gently examined her frostbitten feet, washing away blood and snow before applying salve from a small tin. His hands were calloused but gentle, and Eliza found herself watching his face strong-jawed and weathered, with a small scar cutting through his right eyebrow. "What happened to you out there?" he asked quietly, wrapping her feet in clean bandages. The question opened floodgates. "Bartholomew Green," she began, voice trembling. "He's been trying to buy our land for months. My father refused. Tonight Green came with men. They were drunk. They set fire to our home." Her voice broke. "My father, I heard a gunshot as I ran." Finn's expression darkened. "Bartholomew Green." "The cattle baron," Eliza nodded. You know him. Know of him, Finn replied grimly. He's been pushing smaller ranchers out across the territory. He hesitated. Your name, Eliza Nolan, recognition flickered in his eyes. Thomas Nolan's daughter, you knew my father. We met at the trading post in Silver Creek last autumn. Good man. Finn's jaw tightened. I'm sorry, Eliza. The sympathy in his voice broke something inside her. Tears flowed freely as the reality of her situation crashed down upon her shoulders. Orphaned, homeless, alone in the wilderness with a stranger, albeit one who had saved her life. Rest, Finn said gently, adding wood to the fire. You're safe tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure things out. Despite her grief and fear, exhaustion claimed Eliza quickly. She drifted to sleep watching Finn clean his rifle by firelight, his presence a bulwark against the terrors waiting beyond the cabin walls. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through frost-covered windows. Eliza woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting the previous night's horrors. Reality returned swiftly, bringing fresh waves of grief that threatened to overwhelm her. Morning, Finn said softly from the small table where he sat drinking coffee. How are you feeling? Alive, Eliza answered honestly. Thanks to you, he nodded, rising to pour her a cup. I've put some clothes out for you. They'll be too big, but they're clean and warm. The offered garments, a flannel shirt and canvas trousers, swallowed her slender frame, but Eliza couldn't deny their comfort. She rolled the sleeves and pant legs, securing them with a leather belt cinched to its smallest setting. We need to get to Silver Creek, Finn said as she joined him at the table. Sheriff Dawson should hear what Green's done. Eliza's hands tightened around her cup. Will it matter? Green practically owns the territory. Not everyone, Finn replied, his expression resolute, and murder's still murder, even in Colorado territory. After a simple breakfast of cornbread and jerky, Finn helped Eliza onto his horse. Her feet were too injured to wear boots, so he wrapped them in soft cloth before securing them in the stirrups. Mounting behind her, Finn urged the horse forward into the snow-covered landscape. Your cabin, Eliza said suddenly. Won't Green's men find it? Let them try, Finn answered, something dangerous flashing in his eyes. But I doubt they will. Not many know it's there. As they rode, Eliza learned that Finn had come west after the war between the states, seeking solitude and purpose in the vast frontier. He'd worked as a ranch hand, scout, and occasionally for the territorial marshals when they needed someone who knew the backcountry. And now, she asked, aware of his solid presence at her back, now I trap and hunt, trade furs in town when needed. A pause. I prefer my own company most days. I'm sorry to disrupt your solitude, Eliza said softly. Finn's arms tightened slightly around her waist. Some disruptions are worth it, Miss Nolan. They rode in companionable silence until midday when Finn reined in near a small creek. While the horse drank, he helped Eliza down and checked her bandaged feet. We're making good time, he assured her. Silver Creek's about 3 hours ahead if the weather holds. The sky had cleared, revealing a vast blue expanse above the snow-covered pines. In another context, Eliza might have found the scene beautiful. Instead, each mile brought her closer to confronting her father's murderer and her uncertain future. What will you do? Finn asked, as if reading her thoughts. After we reach town, Eliza stared at the distant mountains. I don't know. My aunt lives in Denver, but she trailed off. The prospect of city life held little appeal after growing up on the frontier. You could testify against Green, Finn suggested, if the law does its job. And if it doesn't, the question hung in the frigid air between them. Finn's expression hardened. Then other solutions exist. The implications of his words should have frightened her. Instead, Eliza felt a strange comfort in knowing this quiet, dangerous man stood firmly on her side. They continued their journey, the horse picking its way carefully through snowdrifts. When Silver Creek's wooden buildings finally appeared in the distance, Eliza felt both relief and dread. We'll go straight to the sheriff, Finn decided. Best not to let Green know you're alive just yet. The town was bustling despite the winter weather. Miners, ranchers, and townspeople moved purposefully along the boardwalks, paying little attention to the pair as they rode down the main street toward the sheriff's office. Sheriff Dawson was a graying man with shrewd eyes that widened at the sight of Eliza in Finn's oversized clothes. "Miss Nolan," he stood quickly. "We thought you'd perished in the fire." "Fire?" Finn asked sharply. "So you know about it?" Dawson nodded grimly. "Got word this morning. Green's foreman rode in claiming bandits attacked the Nolan place." His gaze shifted to Eliza. "Said they found Thomas's body in the ruins. I was organizing a search party for you." "It was Green," Eliza stated flatly. "He and his men came drunk demanding our land. When father refused again, they set fire to the house." The sheriff's expression remained carefully neutral. "That's a serious accusation against an important man, Miss Nolan." "I was there," she insisted. "I heard my father's dying shot as I fled." Dawson sighed heavily, rubbing his mustache. "Green's in town right now, drinking at the Silverhorn Saloon with the mayor and Judge Wilson. They're celebrating his new acquisition." Finn's hand moved to his revolver. "The judge is here. Circuit court's in session," Dawson confirmed, eyeing Finn warily. "Now don't go doing anything foolish, Zachary. Green has 6 men with him." 7 against 2, Finn mused. "I've faced worse odds." 3, Dawson corrected quietly. "I may have my suspicions about Green, but murder's a line I won't let stand crossed." He reached for his shotgun. "Miss Nolan, you'd best wait here." "No." Eliza stood, ignoring the pain in her feet. "I want to see his face when he realizes I survived." Neither man argued, perhaps recognizing the steel beneath her grief. They flanked her as they walked toward the saloon, townspeople stopping to stare at the unusual procession. The Silverhorn fell silent as they entered, conversations dying as heads turned toward the door. Bartholomew Green sat at a center table, glass raised in mid-toast. His florid face drained of color at the sight of Eliza. "Impossible," he whispered. "Bartholomew Green," Sheriff Dawson announced loudly. "You're wanted for questioning in the matter of Thomas Nolan's murder." The saloon erupted in murmurs as Judge Wilson, a thin man with spectacles, stood slowly. "These are serious allegations, Sheriff. What evidence do you have?" "An eyewitness," Dawson replied, nodding toward Eliza. Green recovered quickly, his shock transforming to calculated charm. "Miss Nolan, thank the Lord you survived. When my men and I arrived to find your homestead aflame, we feared the worst." "Liar," Eliza hissed. "You set the fire yourself." Green addressed the room with theatrical concern. "The poor girl is clearly distraught, confused by her ordeal." "Bandits attacked her home. We tried to save your father, Miss Nolan. Truly we did." One of Green's men nodded vigorously. "That's right. We heard gunshots and rode to help." Finn stepped forward, his voice deadly quiet. "Strange that you knew exactly where to find Miss Nolan's nightgown in the snow then, miles from her homestead." Green blinked. "What nonsense is this? When I found Miss Nolan last night, she was fleeing through the snow in nothing but her nightgown," Finn continued. "How would you know that detail unless you'd seen her escape?" The saloon grew deathly quiet as Green's foreman shifted uncomfortably. "Furthermore," Finn added, "your men have been bragging about clearing out the Nolan place all morning. Jacob at the livery heard them plain as day." Green's eyes darted toward the exit, calculating his chances. "This is absurd. My word against a half-wild trapper and a hysterical woman." "And a blacksmith," called a voice from the door as a burly man entered. "I was repairing my wagon near your camp last night, Green." "Heard you planning the whole thing." Judge Wilson cleared his throat. "Sheriff, I believe we have sufficient cause for arrest pending investigation." Green's hand moved toward his jacket, but Finn was faster, his revolver appearing as if by magic. "Don't," he advised softly. The tension broke as Green's men reached for their weapons. Gunshots filled the saloon as patrons dove for cover. Eliza found herself pulled behind the bar by Finn as bullets splintered wood around them. When the shooting stopped, acrid gunsmoke hung in the air. Green lay wounded, clutching his shoulder and glaring with undisguised hatred. 2 of his men were down, the others with their hands raised in surrender. "You'll hang for this, Zachary," Green spat. "No," Judge Wilson said, emerging from behind an overturned table. "You'll stand trial, Green. And from what I've witnessed, the outcome seems rather predetermined." In the chaotic hours that followed, Eliza gave her formal statement to the judge. Green and his surviving men were locked in the town jail, and a telegram was sent to the territorial governor informing him of the situation. "Your testimony was crucial," Judge Wilson told Eliza afterward, "but there's still the matter of your father's property with no will." "The land is rightfully hers," Finn interrupted. "Thomas Nolan homesteaded it legally," the judge nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed. However, a young woman alone might find it difficult to maintain such a property." Eliza straightened her spine. "I'm stronger than I look, Your Honor." "No doubt," Wilson replied with unexpected gentleness. "Nevertheless, practical considerations remain. The homestead is burned, winter is upon us, and rebuilding would require substantial resources." Reality settled heavily on Eliza's shoulders. Everything she and her father had worked for lay in ashes. Starting over seemed an insurmountable task. "She'll have help," Finn said quietly. Both Eliza and the judge turned to him in surprise. "If she wants it," he added, meeting Eliza's gaze. That night, Dr. Milford insisted Eliza stay at his home while her frostbite healed. As his wife showed her to a small but comfortable bedroom, Eliza's mind whirled with the day's events and Finn's unexpected offer. A soft knock at her door after dinner revealed Finn, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "May I speak with you?" he asked. They sat by the window overlooking Silver Creek's Main Street, now quiet beneath a blanket of fresh snow. "I meant what I said," Finn began. "About helping rebuild." Eliza studied him carefully. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" "You're not a stranger anymore," he replied simply. "And what Green did, it isn't right." "No, it isn't," she agreed. "But rebuilding takes more than righteous anger, Mr. Zachary." "Finn," he corrected gently. "And I have some savings, not much but enough for lumber and supplies." He hesitated. "I also have strong hands willing to work." The offer touched her deeply, but practicality tempered her response. "I can't accept charity." "Not charity," Finn insisted. "Partnership. Your land has good water and grazing, combined with my skills hunting and trapping." He trailed off, suddenly seeming embarrassed by his own proposal. "Partnership?" Eliza repeated, considering the word and all it might imply. "That's a significant commitment from someone I've known barely 2 days." Finn's eyes held her steadily. Sometimes 2 days is enough to recognize what matters. The simple declaration hung between them, laden with meaning neither was quite ready to articulate. Eliza felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the room's fireplace. "Let me think on it," she said finally. Finn nodded, rising to leave. At the door, he turned back. "Whatever you decide, you're not alone anymore, Eliza. Remember that." Long after he'd gone, Eliza remained by the window, watching snowflakes dance in the lamplight. For the first time since fleeing her burning home, the future seemed to hold possibilities rather than just loss. 3 days later, Green's trial began. The territorial court convened in Silver Creek's small meeting hall, packed with curious townspeople and ranchers from surrounding homesteads. Judge Wilson presided with stern efficiency, allowing no disruptions as witnesses testified to Green's threats against smaller landowners throughout the region. When Eliza's turn came, she spoke clearly and steadily, despite Green's intimidating glare from the defendant's table. She recounted the night's events in unflinching detail, her father's final stand, Green's drunken rage, and her desperate flight into the blizzard. "And if not for Mr. Zachary finding you," Judge Wilson prompted. Eliza glanced toward Finn, sitting attentively in the front row. "I would have died in the snow, Your Honor." The trial concluded on its 4th day. Green was found guilty of murder and arson, sentenced to hang at the territorial prison in Denver. His properties and assets were to be divided among those he had wronged, with the largest portion allocated to Eliza as restitution. "Justice has been served," Judge Wilson announced, "though it cannot bring back what was lost." Outside the courthouse, townspeople offered Eliza their condolences and support. Many had suffered Green's intimidation themselves and expressed relief that his reign of terror had ended. "What will you do now?" asked Mrs. Milford, who had kindly hosted Eliza throughout the trial. Before she could answer, Finn approached, leading his horse. Saddlebags bulged with supplies and a newly purchased wagon waited nearby. "I believe Miss Nolan is heading home," he said, glancing questioningly at Eliza. She smiled, her first genuine smile since that terrible night. Yes, Mr. Zachary, we're heading home. The journey to her father's land took most of the day. As they crested the final hill, Eliza steeled herself for the sight of destruction. The charred remains of the cabin stood stark against the snow-covered landscape, a painful reminder of all she had lost. Yet something unexpected caught her eye: fresh-cut timber stacked neatly beside the ruins, and a partially constructed frame rising where the old root cellar had been. "What is this?" she asked, turning to Finn. "I came out yesterday while you were giving your final testimony," he explained. "Thought we might need a head start." The word held a universe of questions. Finn's gaze was steady and sure. "If you'll have me as a partner." Eliza studied the beginnings of the new structure, then looked back at this man who had saved her in more ways than one. In just a week, he had become her rescuer, her advocate, and perhaps something more, something neither had dared name yet. "Partners, then," she agreed, extending her hand. Finn took it, his calloused palm warm against hers. But instead of shaking, he gently turned her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles, a gesture so unexpectedly tender that Eliza felt tears spring to her eyes. "For now," he said softly. They worked side by side through the remaining winter months, salvaging what they could from the ruins and building anew. The cabin took shape slowly but surely, stronger and more substantial than what had stood before. Townspeople came to help, grateful for Green's downfall and impressed by Eliza's determination. By early spring, new life sprouted around the homestead. Eliza planted a garden while Finn repaired fencing and built a small stable. They settled into a comfortable rhythm, learning each other's habits and histories during long evenings by the fireplace. Finn spoke of his Mississippi childhood, his time in the Union Army, and his journey west seeking peace after too much bloodshed. Eliza shared memories of her mother who had died of fever years before, her father's dreams for their land, and her own hopes for the future. "I never thought I'd have this again," she admitted one night as they sat on the newly built porch watching stars emerge above the distant mountains. "Have what?" Finn asked, his voice gentle in the gathering darkness. "A home, a future." Eliza turned to face him. "Someone to share it with." Finn reached slowly for her hand, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers intertwined with hers. "I never thought I'd want those things," he confessed. "After the war, I couldn't imagine deserving peace or happiness. And now," Eliza whispered, "now I can't imagine returning to solitude." His blue eyes reflected the first evening stars. "That night I found you in the snow, something changed. Like finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing." Eliza moved closer, drawn by the quiet sincerity in his voice. "I was so afraid that night, not just of dying, but of being truly alone in the world." "You're not alone," Finn promised, his hand coming up to gently touch her cheek. "Not as long as I draw breath." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home. His lips were warm and certain against hers, conveying everything words had yet to express. A week later, Finn rode into Silver Creek and returned with Reverend Pemberton. In the presence of their newfound friends and neighbors, Eliza and Finn exchanged simple vows beneath the flowering apple tree they had planted to mark their new beginning. "I took you in from the cold," Finn said, placing a simple gold band on her finger, "but you brought warmth back to my life." Eliza touched the ring, her father's wedding band resized by the town's jeweler. "You wrapped me in safety when I had nothing, and now I give you everything I am in return." As summer bloomed across the Colorado Territory, their homestead flourished. The cabin expanded to include a proper kitchen where Eliza experimented with recipes traded from neighbors. Finn's trapping and hunting supplemented their income, while the compensation from Green's estate allowed them to purchase cattle and hire 2 hands to help work the growing ranch. Visitors often remarked on the harmony between them, the way they moved in tandem, anticipated each other's needs, and balanced each other's strengths. What had begun as partnership deepened into something richer and more profound with each passing day. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Finn took Eliza riding to a meadow high above their homestead. A picnic awaited beneath an ancient pine, complete with a bottle of wine he'd traded for with a French trapper. Do you ever think about that night?" Eliza asked as they watched clouds drift over distant peaks. "How differently things might have gone if you hadn't been riding that trail." "Every day," Finn admitted, refilling her glass, "but I prefer to think it wasn't chance." "No," she smiled. "What was it then? Destiny, perhaps." He met her gaze steadily. "I was always meant to find you in that snow." Eliza leaned against his shoulder, contentment washing through her. "From such terrible beginnings to the best of endings," Finn finished, pressing a kiss to her temple, but it wasn't an ending at all, Eliza realized. It was merely the first chapter in a story still unfolding. As winter gave way to spring again, she discovered she was carrying their child new life growing from the love they had built together. When she told Finn, his eyes filled with wonder and fear in equal measure. "A family," he whispered, placing a reverent hand on her still flat stomach. "Something I never dared dream of. Are you afraid?" Eliza asked softly, recognizing the shadow that sometimes crossed his face when he spoke of the future. "Terrified," he admitted with characteristic honesty. "But also more determined than ever to make this land safe and prosperous for our child." Their daughter arrived during the first snowfall of the following winter, her cries filling the cabin with new life as Dr. Milford pronounced her healthy and strong. They named her Hope, for what she represented to them both. Cradling his newborn daughter, Finn looked at Eliza with tears shining in his eyes. 2 years ago, I was a solitary man with nothing but my horse and rifle, convinced I needed nothing else." Eliza reached for his hand, twining their fingers together. "And I was a girl who thought she'd lost everything that mattered. Look at us now," he marveled, gazing down at Hope's sleeping face. As their daughter grew, so did their ranch. The Rocking Z became known throughout the territory for its fair dealings and quality stock. 2 more children joined their family: Thomas, named for Eliza's father, and Mary, for Finn's long-departed mother. On cold winter nights, the children would beg for the story of how their parents met. Eliza would smile at Finn across their cozy cabin, the years having only deepened their connection. "Tell us again, Pa," little Thomas would plead, "about how you saved Ma in the blizzard." And Finn would gather them close, his deep voice painting pictures of that fateful night, carefully omitting the darker elements until they were old enough to understand. "She fled through the snow in her nightgown," he would begin, catching Eliza's eye with a private smile. "I wrapped her in my blanket and whispered that she was safe. And she was," Hope would chime in, familiar with the tale, "forever and always." "That's right," Finn would agree, reaching across to take Eliza's hand. "Forever and always." On their 20th anniversary, long after Green's evil had faded to a distant memory, Finn and Eliza stood on their porch watching their grown children tend to evening chores. The ranch had prospered beyond their wildest dreams, becoming one of the most respected in Colorado. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if you'd chosen a different path that night?" Eliza asked, leaning into his embrace. "If you hadn't ridden out in the blizzard," Finn shook his head, silver now threading through his dark hair, "there was never any choice. Something called me into that storm as surely as sunrise follows darkness." "Providence," Eliza suggested. "Love," Finn corrected gently. "Even before I knew you, I think my heart was searching." As twilight settled over their land and the first stars appeared in the vastness above, Eliza remembered the terrified young woman who had fled through snow in nothing but a nightgown. How far she had traveled since that desperate night, not just in distance but in healing and hope. "You're thinking about it again," Finn observed, recognizing the particular quality of her silence. "Yes," she admitted, "but not with fear anymore, with gratitude." Finn turned her gently in his arms until they faced each other. 20 years had etched lines around his eyes and mouth, but his gaze remained as clear and true as the day they'd met. "You know," he said softly, "when I wrapped you in that blanket and told you that you were safe, I was making a vow without realizing it." "A vow you've kept faithfully," Eliza replied, reaching up to trace the scar through his eyebrow. "As have you." He captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Every day you choose to build this life with me is a gift I never take for granted." In the distance, their eldest grandson called for them to join the family for supper. The smell of home-cooked food and the sound of laughter drifted from the main house where 3 generations now gathered. "Shall we?" Finn asked, offering his arm with the courtly gesture that still made Eliza's heart flutter after all these years. She took it, smiling up at the man who had found her in a storm and brought her home. "Lead on, cowboy." Hand in hand, they walked toward the warmth and light of the house they had built together, not just the physical structure, but the love and legacy that would endure long after they were gone. From the darkest night had come the brightest dawn, and neither would ever forget how precious their happiness had been in the winning.